So, does anyone care to touch on this further?
For example, when describing illegal immigration, the left likes to use words and phrases like undocumented immigrants and migrants. These terms are designed to sound softer and take the edge off the fact that these people are illegally in the United States. It is important to note that they specifically avoid using the word alien, which is the terminology used in federal law. To be clear, alien is not a negative or pejorative term. It is a legal term of art. It simply means that an individual is not a citizen of a particular country. Language matters here for a lot of reasons, but
My name is Jerry. I left MAGA, and I'm going to talk about Project 2025, but from a different angle. I've got the book at the ready. In the description below, there's a link to the Heritage Foundation. They have the free PDF form or version. There's other places you might be able to find it. I had to use Opera browser because Brave browser wouldn't pull it up. I don't know what's up with that, but that's that. Anyway, the direction that I'm taking though for doing the Project 2025 thing is I'm actually going to take a look at all 24 of the training videos. Now, this first one is fairly lengthy. It's 49 and a half minutes long. I just did a video on David Barton. You can see it's these two ladies talking. Actually, I'm going to go ahead, full disclosure right here. I'm going to go ahead and speed it up because yeah, you'll understand when we get there, I hope. Um, but yeah, let's go ahead and jump into this. I don't know how long this is going to take. It might take two pieces, parts to get through this because, I mean, it's a lengthy video. But I'm still going to want to react to it as we move forward. So let's roll it. Thank you, ProPublica, for getting this to happen. ProPublica and documented, obtained the videos from Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 that are intended to train political appointees for the next conservative administration. And trust me, they're not going to stop here. Yeah, I published the videos unedited and the Heritage
Hi, I'm
Foundation
Katie
published
Sullivan, and just a normal American woman. But to the left, that makes me a cisgendered ethno-imperialist birthing person with pronouns she, her. Words like that are quite a mouthful, and it's one America needs to spit out before we choke on it.
In the eyes of many in the world, this every 4-year ceremony we accept as normal is nothing less than a miracle.
Yeah, this intro's crazy.
Understand that a nation is only living as long as it is striving.
Only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger.
This great nation will endure as it has endured, will revive and will prosper.
Whether we go forward together with courage or turn back to policies that weakened our economy, diminished our leadership in the world, America's future will be in your hands.
And of course they leaned into that Reagan quote. Y'all might see me hitting the pipe through this at some point. I'm just saying. Wow. By the way, this is a cold watch for me. I started trying to watch this a while back. And you can see down there that ProPublica published these on August 10th, 2024. I have been trying to get to this. And it's only just recently that I feel like I'm mentally healthy enough to take on this challenge. So that's it. Let's try to move forward or move through it. Hidden meanings, the monsters in the attic.
Bethany, are your children afraid of monsters in the attic or under the bed?
Yeah, they have been, but we always tell them that they do not exist.
Today we have news. There are monsters in Uncle Sam's attic.
It's the words,
Please notice that both of these ladies are blonde haired and white.
phrases, definitions that are used, which may look like one thing, but absolutely mean another. And it is scary.
During this training, we will identify the problem, discuss examples from our time in the federal government, as well as the 5 cross-cutting principles of the current administration. We will teach you.
Okay, context on that current administration was the Biden administration. And they're going to teach you how to what?
How to unwind the words and phrases that have been so artfully layered into every document in the federal government. You can do this in any role at any level of seniority. This training will prepare you to make changes and fast. The left continually pivots and assaults definitions.
Why am I thinking all of a sudden of that scene from 1984 where there was that guy that works in the newspeak department writing new versions of the dictionary? Um, except these people seem to be wanting to go backwards from where we've been.
Definitions and phrases. They twist words and phrases to support subconscious acceptance of a philosophy that was rejected or is against the grain of human existence, like what is a woman? Perhaps the most effective
A woman is an adult female human being.
tool the left wields is their ability to engage in constant subliminal advertising through their narrative, words, and phrases. Marxism became socialism, then democratic socialism, and is now represented by the terms social justice and equity. This is perhaps the
Whoa. Let's back that out. That seems like a false equivalency to me. You know, I may have to do this in two parts.
constant subliminal advertising through their narrative, words, and phrases. Marxism became socialism, then democratic socialism, and is now represented by the terms social justice and equity. This is
Oh my.
perhaps the most scary of all.
Katie, what brings to mind is the quote, "He who controls the language rules the world." It's attributed
By the way, you might be hearing my dishwasher running in the background.
to Joseph Stalin and other tyrants. And George Orwell stated, "He who controls language controls culture." Even more, Hitler and others lived by the creed. If you repeat a lie often enough, people will believe it. Without doubt, it's true. Language is a powerful and often controlling tool.
Career bureaucrats and the left are also using language to change culture and gain more and more authority, thereby upsetting the balance of power envisioned by our founding fathers.
Wow, this is not aging well, is it? It would seem to me like the Trump administration is continuing to grab power, which is the spin behind this narrative,
This, in essence, weaponized language
or the results behind this narrative.
of power envisioned by our founding fathers. This, in essence, weaponized language against the American people.
This training is vital to you as a political appointee. If there's one thing you take from this training, it is to know when you start your job as a political appointee, every single word, phrase, and acronym must be vetted, and you must determine what implications every word has before publishing or moving forward with any official or internal document.
All right.
Okay, that sounds like a Scientology practice of clearing your words. By the way, Greta Van Susteren is a Scientologist. I know I keep mentioning this, but Greta Van Susteren is the one who taught Franklin Graham how to use social media. Okay, so back to the training video.
Right. So now that we have identified the problem, let's give the viewers a taste of what we saw in the Trump administration. Bethany and I were both part of a coordinated effort in the Trump administration focused on trying to take back hijacked language and definitions across the United States government and even at our engagements in the United Nations. From our experiences, we will teach you how to identify the left's progressive language, scrutinize career staff compositions for dangerous language, and how to combat their manipulative efforts, ensuring clarity of definition and conservative intention. Bethany and I are going to give you some examples of what we mean by this need to always ensure clarity, but in no way are
They even said it, clarity, word clearing, a Scientology practice. Um, I've shared up a video before. Uh, I may actually want to sit down and do a reaction to it and point out what the guy's talking about and the parallels between QAnon and Scientology. I've got a playlist I may go ahead and tag it onto this and into the description on it. Yeah, I'll put a link to uh, the playlist in the description of this video of a book that was written by an OT8, Operating Thetan Level 8, who's a Scientologist. It's their ranking system, a training system. And anyway, Bridge to Nowhere. Anyway, he wrote this book, uh, Trump Saves, or How Trump Saved Scientology, and it reads just like QAnon. And so I didn't realize the book was written by a Scientologist till after I got purchased it. But that was a fun project.
Are we able to foresee the future and anticipate how the progressive left will continue to co-opt even more words and definitions? We can tell you the words and phrases being used today, but by the time you enter the administration, these examples may be obsolete. This will help you spot crucial issue areas to pay close attention to. We do not know what they will be calling men and women by the time you begin your tenure with the administration. The left is trying.
Oh my goodness. Sorry, earbud users. Uh, wow. Wow. Yeah. Okay. So I would say that that's a dissociative phrase. No contact with reality whatsoever.
Will be calling men and women by the time you begin your tenure with the administration. The left is trying to dismantle America and rebuild it in their own image by using the art of deception, and words and definitions are their weapon of choice. Remember, words change culture.
Oh my. Oh, good grief.
Bethany, with your extensive experience with both domestic and international policy issues, and in light of your role in leadership positions at USAID, can you walk us through some examples of how the left uses
I wonder how she feels about Doge having done what they did to USAID and cutting it.
words, weaponizes really, words and definitions? Uh, and if you could do that in a context of the cross-cutting issues that are identified in the mandate for leadership, and really as we understand, the cross-cutting issues were identified because they are the pillars of the Biden administration. And
Okay, so Doge was actually directed as a part of Project 2025. I had not made that connection, so I'm glad I'm going back that I'm going through these, and instead of going back through that 900-page document, it's just wild. It's crazy. It's nuts.
so they've been layered into virtually every document in the federal government. If you could walk us through some of those examples, I think it would be incredibly helpful.
I'd be happy to, absolutely. The 5 topic areas for today's discussion are centered on women, children, and family, environment, human rights and border security, the gender cult, and equity. The first topic, women, children, and family. I worked on international issues and very closely followed the language presented at the United Nations. And I saw up close and personal how this indeed is true. Language is used to control culture. I'll never forget a conversation I had with the chief of staff at USAID. We are trying to provide alternative language for the highly controversial phrase comprehensive sexuality education, or CSE, which at the United Nations had come to mean not just typical sex education, but instead had been morphed into teaching and normalizing sex at very early ages, even as young as preschool.
I'm gonna call bullshit on that. No, yeah, seriously, I'm gonna call bullshit on that. No, unless it was Paolo Zampali who was heading up the Children's Services Division over at the United Nations as an ambassador from the Dominican Republic, I think it was. Yeah, I think it was the Dominican Republic. Paolo Zampali is currently tangled up in the Trump administration. In fact, if I remember my research accurately, Pablo Zampali was the one who is actually responsible for introducing Donnie and Melania. It was facilitated by Jeffrey and Ghislaine, but it was actually handled by Paulo. And, oh, good grief.
School. And for girls who became pregnant, that abortion was a preferable method of birth control. Back to the conversation with the chief of staff. He suggested several alternatives, but each time I told him that, unfortunately, his recommended edit was also interpreted as CSE. Frustrated, he vented, "They have literally co-opted the English language." And it was at that moment that I realized
These people have co-opted the English language.
that the progressive left is controlling the language, redefining definitions, and by doing so, are ruling the world. On a positive note, despite all the angst that we did succeed.
Oh my goodness. We really like the Webster dictionary. We like dictionaries. Oh my goodness.
So are ruling the world. On a positive note, despite all the angst that we did succeed on that negotiation. DevEx published an article with the headline, "No Mention of Reproductive Rights in Declarations Out of G7 Development Ministerial." You can read more about this in the course materials section. Now, let's talk about the word abortion. The left got very creative years ago and started using different words to make abortion sound a little less like murder. For example, sexual and reproductive health, reproductive rights, sexual and reproductive health services, reproductive health services, sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights, sexual and reproductive health and rights. All of these include abortion.
I, I, I just, yeah, yeah. This is how they think. I'm gonna leave that gap in there. I really don't know what to say. I mean, I, I, I've tried, I've tried, but this isn't about me. This is about them, how they think, and what they're actually trying to teach people or have been teaching people.
For years, we knew that the terms above that I just mentioned had been used and that they were code for abortion. The left and the career bureaucrats at state and USAID told us, oh, no, no, no. But then when I was negotiating with Canada for the G7 Development Ministerial, I said, well, can we just use these terms and add that does not include abortion? And their response was telling. They said, but it does include abortion. Even with that admission, I had a difficult time convincing political appointees that these terms were co-opted. Another example hits closer to home and highlights how imperative it is for political appointees to ensure definitions are correct and explicitly followed. 3 days after President Trump took office on January 20th, 2017, he issued a presidential memorandum regarding the Mexico City policy. This became known as the Protecting Life and Global Health Assistance Policy, or the expanded Mexico City policy. When I arrived at USAID in June 2017, I was the first political appointee in a bureau outside the front office and the 6th political appointee in the building. Despite President Trump issuing a presidential memorandum.
Wait. She's a political appointee without what?
I was the first political appointee in a bureau outside the front office and
The first political appointee in the building outside the front office. And the sixth one in the building.
6th political appointee in the building. Despite President Trump issuing a presidential memorandum at the very onset of his administration to immediately change course and to protect life, even months later, his guidance was ignored. I remember hearing careers refer to this policy and even seeing documents that referred to it as the global gag order. I immediately told the career staff that we do not refer to it as a global gag order, but instead appropriately as the Protecting Life and Global Health Assistance policy. To some, it may seem inconsequential, but it actually was completely undermining the president and the American people who had elected President Trump. So opposed to this policy change, the left actually started a new organization and an international movement called She Decides, which invited NGOs and other foreign governments to join and actively promote abortion services and advocacy, essentially joining together to try to counter what the Trump administration was doing to protect life. Language.
Wait, okay, I'm gonna back that up a second. But are you hearing this woman so adamantly advocating against women's rights?
Essentially joining together to try to counter what the Trump administration was doing to protect life. Language matters. Bethany,
It's incredible how the left is able to make killing children and babies a pro movement. I mean, their narrative is just incredible. And so
Now, I'm going to back that up a little bit. Now, bear in mind, okay, these are the same people that claim to be pro-life. They're anti-abortion, but they're pro-war. Now, when I was growing up in this environment, and up until even just a few years ago, I could justify the death penalty, and I could justify war, and I could justify being anti-abortion. I was raised to believe that life starts at conception. Much later in life, I find out that it's like what first heartbeats detected at like 14 weeks. And then I got to looking at other faith systems during my deconstruction, where I saw that, like with the Jewish people, they don't recognize life until the newborn draws first breath. And it gave me a different view on the world and on life, but it blows me away. Then again, I understand that she's deeply indoctrinated in this faith system, and it's incredibly patriarchal if you're unaware. But yeah, anyway, let's go back to this training video.
a pro movement. I mean, their narrative is just incredible and so opposite of what the reality of the situation is. We see that also with environment, right? So I remember when I was in school, in elementary school, we were taught that we were all going to be frozen over by an ice age, and of course, this was terrifying. And then in the 80s.
Okay, yeah, she's talking about it in the 70s, and because I remember that, so that puts her about my age. Um, wow.
It was acid rain. We were all going to die from the acid rain. And then it moved to global warming, which I think.
Well, we made some changes to clean up factory exhaust. To anyway, environmental efforts have changed a lot of things.
Most of the people watching this tape will remember that was during the Obama administration.
Yes.
And then science comes along and disproves the global warming theory in large part, and we have one of the most frigid winters ever known. And then the next thing you know, they're calling it climate change. Now,
Wait, hang on. Last I knew, she was talking about the 90s, and then she was talking about Obama, and that was maybe she did jump to the 2000s.
comes along and disproves the global warming theory in large part, and we have one of the most frigid winters ever known. And then the next thing you know, they're calling it climate change. Now, I always never known disproves that was during the Obama administration.
Yes.
And then most of the people all going to die from the acid rain. And then it moved to global warming, which I think, most of the people watching this tape will remember. That was during the Obama administration.
Yes.
And then science comes along and disproves the global warming theory in large part, and we have one of the most frigid winters ever known. And then the next thing you know, they're calling it climate change. Now, I always understood that climate change meant seasons. Our climate does change all the time, but of course that's not what's meant by the left. What do you think?
Uh, I at least was able to recognize as a historian and anthropologist there are greater swings. Ice ages come and go. There's this geological scale of things. But I also understand that manufacturing pollution has created a lot of issues for the environment ever since the Industrial Revolution.
Think about all of about the left's words and definitions in the environment?
It's a great point, Katie. They don't stop. Climate change, allegedly, is everywhere. And if the American people elect a conservative president, his administration will have to eradicate climate change references from absolutely everywhere. And according
Oh, so just like Trump was saying with the COVID numbers, if you're not testing and counting, they're going to go down, right? Okay, great.
to our eradicate climate change references from absolutely everywhere. And according to our intelligence community, the number one threat facing our country today is, drumroll, climate change. Not Russia, not China, not AI, climate change. This shows how the federal government is all in on this issue. And climate change activists wield a lot of power. This is an issue to pay attention to as it has infiltrated every part of the federal government. Now, when I think of climate change, I immediately think of population control, don't you? I think about
No, I don't. I mean, that used to be the thing, but no, these 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 temperature swings that we're having in 2026 here in the Midwest of the United States have been crazy. It's been ridiculous for me to work through with my arthritis and fibromyalgia. It's like, what is it today? It's going to be in the 80s tomorrow. I think it's supposed to break 90, and then day after, or maybe I don't know. Anyway, by weekend it's supposed to be back up to 57. We're having 30, 40 degree swings and the weather. There's blizzards up north. There's tornadoes and hailstorms down south. There's rain all around us. We got some rain the other day, but these are not the weather patterns that I remember from my childhood some 50 years ago. Uh, oh, good grief.
the people
Science deniers are the worst.
who climate change. I immediately think of population control, don't you? I think about the people who don't want you to have children because of the impact on the environment. Perhaps not everyone will make that connection, but after spending time in the international space trying to protect life, I can tell you that this is part of their ultimate goal, to control people.
Air of authority in her words because she's been someplace and done something. And I'm giving taking a wild guess that since she was with USAID, that her travels dealt with aid distribution there, which is part of America, or was anyway, part of America's um, what's the phrase I'm looking for? Soft diplomacy. Uh, Smokey. My cat just climbed down out the window and got in my lap. Anyway, but anyway, she's trying to give herself an air of authority and insight, like Dan Bongino did with his former Secret Service background. He allegedly was a bodyguard for the Clinton administration. How come he didn't help Trump during Trump's first administration? How come he didn't help Donnie put the Clintons away? I mean, I remember from the debate that Donnie and Hillary had. She's like, he told her that if he was president, she'd be in prison. Anyway, I'm digressing seriously.
Let me share a personal example of how the left seeks to permeate every dimension of life through their skewed terminology and definition. When I arrived at USAID, I had a career employee ask me how many children I had. I thought it was a bit odd of a question, but to be kind, I answered and I said I had 3 children. And he actually
How is that an odd question?
said to me, "Oh wow, 1.5 too many for the environment." I smiled and I said very
BS.
politely, if I could have 10 more children, I would. The policy book captures the essence of climate change, and I quote, "In the name of combating climate change, policies have been used to create an artificial energy scarcity that will require trillions of dollars in new investment, supported with taxpayer subsidies to address a problem that government and special interests themselves have created." Page 364, end of quote. Population growth, environmental changes, and weather patterns have all been intertwined by the left. They take or even make up a term and create, extend, and alter the definition to validate whatever ideology or position they want to ingrain and convince others is good, when in reality it's not. Often, as you just heard, they are simply not coherent or logical. Remember, our intelligence community identified climate change as the #1 threat to America. So
If we all cook, I'm just saying, if the storms and all that. But then again, they believe that these are signs of the end, signs of the times for the end of days, that Jesus is coming back, so it doesn't matter. Just oh, good grief! And are you watching her lack of animation? She's just so mechanical, very, dare I say it, cultish.
So even if you do not work at the Department of Energy, no matter where you work, because of the Biden administration's executive orders and policy priorities, you will have to look for climate change language and get rid of it.
Bethany, when you were talking about how the left has co-opted so many words and weaponized so many words when it comes to abortion, and that's something that political appointees in the next administration are going to have to really look at, this idea that it's a right. There's many phrases that included rights. Is there other places where rights are used as a catch-all and it means something else?
Katie, that's a great question. And in fact,
Let's let's see where they go with this. Hmm, I'm highly intrigued. How far are we into this? 17 minutes. We're not even a third of the way through, and we're at a half hour. Yeah, this is gonna be a long video.
number 3 is human rights. Human rights and border security. So rights, rights, rights. The left is always coming up with new rights. In the Trump administration, we countered human rights with unalienable rights. The careers went absolutely crazy at USAID. But thankfully, President Trump had established a commission on unalienable rights at the State Department, and we would just point back to the commission. Sadly, our founding documents were not sufficient, but thankfully the commission was. The Department of State's Commission on Unalienable Rights was charged with providing the U.S. government with advice on human rights grounded in our nation's founding principles and the principles of the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now,
So they're leaning into the three-fifths argument.
I'm going to turn over border security to you, Katie, as it deals with legalese.
And we all know that border security is a major issue, and the differences between a conservative presidency and administration and the current administration couldn't be more stark than in this area. So getting the words very precise and correct is crucial. The left has co-opted language and definitions as it relates to immigration. Illegal immigration is one of the most devastating challenges America faces today, particularly when you factor in all of the secondary costs and effects of illegal immigration, including,
I don't know, the deaths of Renee Good, Alex Preddy, and who else?
illicit drug and human trafficking. The left
Oh. So that's where they went. Um, the U.S. State Department cut funding so deeply that they had to shut down the office that monitors international human trafficking. Um, who was it? Which department was it that shut down the monitoring of international terrorism, and DOJ shut down the office that tracks domestic terrorism? And it was the War Department or the State Department that, well, Department of Defense or the State Department that shut down the monitoring of intelligence traffic with Russia and a couple of other countries. Uh,
left knows the American people oppose illegal immigration and understands its effects. So they have spent years using language designed to both conflate illegal immigration and legal immigration, the latter of which most Americans support, and soften the idea that illegal immigration is, in fact, illegal. It is a good
no, it's not. It's not even a thing.
bet that the left
Well, unless you're talking about people that are being trafficked into the country, that's illegal.
has immigration is, in fact, illegal. It is a good bet that the left has group tested the language it uses to cover up the horrors of illegal immigration. For example, when describing illegal immigration, the left likes to use words and phrases like undocumented immigrants and migrants. These terms are
Uh, uh, because they're more accurate.
For example, when describing illegal immigration, the left likes to use words and phrases like undocumented immigrants and migrants. These terms are designed to sound softer and take the edge off the fact that these people are illegally in the United States. It is important to note that they specifically avoid using the word alien, which is the terminology used in federal law. To be clear, alien is not a negative or pejorative term. It is a legal term of art. It simply means that an individual is not a citizen of a particular country. Language matters here for a lot of reasons, but primarily because citizens of the United States have rights that others, including foreign nationals who are illegally on our soil, do not.
And there's the crux of where they're coming from. That is the primary thing that I hear echoing through the echo chambers that are the MAGA digital environments.
I had to guess, I would say that the left's attempt to wash away the term alien stems from their disdain of actual law, since they want to avoid discussion of what federal immigration law actually requires, which is everything they refuse to do, and their interest in washing away the overall value of citizenship.
No, no, no. The difference is alien is an othering term. It's dehumanizing. Immigrant, migrant, these are humans. They are fellow people.
Remember, citizenship places a focus on nationality and sovereignty. The left has bought into the globalist vision of a borderless world, and their language choices reflect that.
I tell you what, I have come to believe that if we didn't have national identities, there would be a whole lot less international conflict on the planet.
The left loves to say that illegal aliens are undocumented. Not only is that terminology not used anywhere in federal law, but it is clearly designed to soften the concept of illegality by making it seem like it's just a technicality. In other words, if you are undocumented, it makes it sound like you can be here legally, but you're missing undocumented. It makes it sound like you can be here legally, but you're missing a few pieces of bureaucratic paperwork. That is
That's exactly what it is. Sorry. That's exactly what it is. So what happens to an American citizen in February or March of 2026 if they don't have all the exact pieces of paper on their person that the government already has copies of? They get snatched up if they don't sound like they're from around there, right, Melania? Oh, wait a minute, you're protected. Or they've got some other than these girls' skin tone. I mean, I'm pretty light colored myself, but there's certain things about me they don't like. Lots of things they don't like. Anyway, uh, yeah, if you're missing some documents, show me your papers.
is simply not the case. If an alien has not gone through the appropriate process for obtaining a visa to enter the United States or otherwise followed United States law to enter the United States, they are illegally here. Period. Hard stop. Calling
Period. Hard stop. So that's why ICE was snatching folks up, or has been, and still are snatching up folks at immigration court, going for the easy pickings. People who are going through the process.
illegal aliens undocumented immigrants is the intellectual equivalent of calling someone who breaks into your house in the middle of the night an undocumented homeowner. It is inaccurate and it is designed to be inaccurate. The
Wow. I had not heard that argument before. Wow. Talk about some hyperbolic nonsense. Wow. Undocumented homeowner.
term migrants or migration are just as deceptive. The left likes to use migrants and migration not only because it sounds gentle, but it also creates confusion. When people hear these terms, they know deep down that migration is seasonal and circular. They think of birds or butterflies. They fly
They're dehumanizing. They're using a dehumanizing rhetoric.
south, they fly north, and so on. And historically, we have had foreign nationals come into the United States for seasonal or agricultural work and then return to their home countries. It would be reasonable and accurate to refer to those individuals as migrant workers because they ultimately return home. But make no mistake, the current mass illegal immigration we are seeing as a result of the Biden administration's intentional actions is not migration, and these people are not migrants. It is an orchestrated invasion being led by the Biden administration in conjunction with the Mexican cartels. The bottom
Okay, I remember sharing that narrative. And I also remember uh, Kamala Harris's root causes letter in reference to the report that was done on immigration. Uh, she pointed out the root cause of this immigration being the corruption of other countries that are being fled, like Venezuela, Colombia, Brazil. Um, yeah, all those South American countries that we're down there jackwagging around in, African countries even that people that individuals have been fleeing because of something that we have going on over there called the Trans-Saharan Anti-Terrorist. I forget the full name of it, but it's an action run by Africa Command and subsidized paid for by American tax dollars. That's why we have military fighting, U.S. military fighting Somali pirates, and it's all across North Africa. Anyway, Trans-Saharan anti-terrorist. Anyway,
bottom line is, we win or lose political fights based on language. If you let the other side of the debate set the terms of the debate, you've already lost. In the context of immigration specifically, we have to start using more accurate language to describe what is going on and pegging our language to existing law. If we can take back the language, here and elsewhere, we will win more of these fights. So Bethany, I mean, these are some great examples. And another one that comes to my mind that has been completely co-opted by the left is gender. And I know you have so much experience
gender. Okay, this ought to be good.
in the history of your professional life in dealing with this. Where are we today on this issue and the language and the words and the definitions?
Let's talk about the word gender. The word gender is no longer a polite way to refer to biological sex, male or female. The word now is completely toxic. It's no longer being used to mean male or female, but now how people identify, which is where we get this idea of gender identity. Katie, did you know that there are between 72 and 1,000 different kinds of gender? We should never use the word gender
Oh my goodness.
as conservatives. It's not specific and it's nonsensical. Instead, use the word sex or biological sex or male and female. And I don't care where you are in the administration, you will deal with the word gender. Speaking of sex, the next phrase
So there's that. They said that part just right out there and just like hit it like a nail and moved right along. Yeah, they don't believe in psychology. They really don't. And that's why there's this this thing rolling around right now that conservatives are happier than liberals because they don't have a collection of psychiatric diagnoses because they don't do therapy.
that
That's how you get a woman who's preaching against herself.
care where you are in the administration, you will deal with the word gender. Speaking of sex, the next phrase that we're going to talk about is sex assigned at birth. Now, I just told you to use the word sex, and you may think that sex assigned at birth, that sounds great. Well, actually, it's not. It's the left's attempt to change biological fact and to try to normalize their belief that biological sex can change. Unfortunately, many folks, including solid conservatives, have accepted this and don't understand the danger in using this term. And
See, uh,
in fact, some conservatives have even taken this term and changed it slightly, gender as revealed at birth. The left is infiltrating our conservative organizations, Christian schools, and even churches. We must always be on guard. And when a new term is introduced, ask, what is the genesis for this new term and why was it introduced? If you see the term
Has anybody else, has anybody been tracking how many different concepts of science they've denied so far? Let me back that back up.
what is the genesis for this new term and why was it introduced? If you see the term sex assigned at birth, delete it and replace it with biological sex. The next issue under gender is pronouns. Don't fall into the progressive left's trap in regard to pronouns. Don't use them in email signature blocks, on LinkedIn, and absolutely do not ask people what their pronouns are on your first day on the job. When I was at USAID, managers were giving training and were told that when they have new staff or have a staff meeting, they should go around the room and ask everyone what their pronouns are. Katie, if that happened to you, what would you do?
I think political appointees, Bethany, great question, need to expect that they are going to be tested by career staff the day they walk in. So that question, every political appointee should be prepared to deal with and answer, whether it's in a training. I don't think it'll take that long. It probably will be the first couple days on the job. So a political appointee is empowered. They are empowered because they are absolutely put in the position, whatever level it is, in order to implement the president's agenda. And that is the business of a political appointee and should be the business of all federal employees. So the answer is simple. We're here to implement the president's priorities and agenda. We are not here to discuss pronouns.
The next
Thought-stopping cliches. Mark that one down.
President's priorities and agenda. We are not here to discuss pronouns.
The next topic is gender affirming care. Gender affirming care and what the Biden administration is promoting is absolutely infuriating, especially as for parents. We need to be protecting our children from these harmful, sterilizing puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and permanent genital mutilation. That's what gender affirming care is.
Let me expound upon that a little bit, without being quite so graphic or disgusted. Some other things that are included in gender affirming care would be hair growth treatments for men or hair replacement techniques for men, um, breast removal for men, gynecomastia, for example, specifically, or hmm, let's see, what else is something else I can think of? Oh, testosterone therapy as gender affirming care, as would be estrogen therapy for individuals, for women who've gone through menopause and need, want that hormonal balance. Let's see. Oh, Viagra would be considered gender affirming care for men. I mean, it helps male performance, right? Anyway, I hope I've made my point.
Not care at all. The idea that gender is fluid is evil, and it is a major initiative of the Biden administration. It's layered.
Okay, I'm going to challenge that thought too. A guy, if he wanted to, could go and turn a wrench on his pickup truck this morning and come in and bake cake and decorate it this afternoon. The first, going out and being a mechanic on his vehicle is stereotypically a masculine thing, but decorating a cake is stereotypically considered a feminine thing. That's a mentality. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, a guy can be a manly man and still enjoy decorating a cake or arranging flowers, but that's a fluid mentality, which is more what gender identity is or gender is about. It's anyway. I'm trying to explain it to some, and to others, I'm preaching to the choir.
Into each and every office, document, task force, and funding priority. Perhaps most commonly known are the changes to Title IX, giving institutions, schools control over children and their gender preference, working against parents, mandating boys compete against girls. This is all done with words. Words matter. Change the words, change the culture. Now, Katie, I know that you've written several.
That's a couple of times they've said that. Change the words, change the culture. So that's taking me back to the Newspeak dictionary from 1984.
Wonderful pieces on equity, and you've done a lot of research on this. And the Biden administration has infiltrated equity into everything. What are your thoughts on equity for the next administration?
Well, it's a little heart-stopping, Bethany, and it's going to take a lot to rewind where we are right now with this, with the left's definition of equity and how that's layered into all federal government documents.
Okay, well, define it for us and we'll see if you're accurate.
Roger Severino states it perfectly in the Project 2025 Mandate for Leadership book. Quote, under President Biden, the mission has shifted from promoting equity in everything we do, end quote, for the sake of, quote, populations sharing a particular characteristic, including race, sexuality, gender identification, ethnicity, and a host of other categories, end quote. Equity no longer means all men are created equal, the cornerstone of our
Ah, see right there. That's it. They are conflating equity and equality. Equity, everybody gets to start out at the same points, which is not what we have in society now, because otherwise we wouldn't be dealing with poverty. Poverty is a policy choice. It's not our choice. It's how things are set up the authoritarian chain. Ah, equality, fair treatment for everybody. But these are not the same thing.
U.S. Constitution, but rather now mandates the government to dispense with unequal treatment in order to achieve what they believe to be equal outcomes.
There's never going to be equal outcomes when you got people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos squirreling away cash. The same thing goes for Bill Gates or any other multi-million millionaire or more, billionaire or more. Hoarding is considered a mental illness. Owning a stack of companies, owning a mountain of resources is hoarding.
Creates divisiveness, not equality. There is no unification under these principles. It is more of a competition of what class is more of a victim, so that particular class can receive the preferential treatment being handed out and mandated by the Biden administration. It's important to note that the very first executive order that President Biden signed just moments after his inauguration on January 20th of 2021 had to do with equity. The left applauded as Biden announced his number one priority, which is advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities throughout the federal government.
Yeah, with the intention of changing policies to level the playing field for everybody.
As part of that executive order, within 90 days, every single agency had to file an equity action plan with the White House. If you want to see or view what you will be up against, take a look at those plans. They're all online under the Office of Management and Budget. Since that time, 9 more executive orders have been executed by the Biden administration about equity. The latest to date is to further advance racial equity. This entails new positions and responsibilities to be embedded into every single agency and office in the federal government. And there is also a directive that all funding that is given out by the federal government prioritize unequal treatment of the American people.
Her problem is that she doesn't want to share the white people power with everybody else. This is not, the country is not like a pie. There's not just so much for everybody, and everybody gets just a crumb here or a piece there.
The noxious tenets of critical race theory and gender ideology should.
Critical race theory. Now I have to admit that's bad wording. It's the actual history of America and how the government has mistreated marginalized communities, like the forced sterilization of some 3,600 First Nations women who had never had children. Anyway, um, and gender ideology. It's science, people.
Should be excised from curriculum.
It's not just genetics. It's psychology.
Treatment of the American people. The noxious tenets of critical race theory and gender ideology should be excised from curriculum in every single public school in this country.
So Katie, this is a lot to absorb. So how do you suggest that we tackle the problem? I know you were the head of a grant office at DOJ and you had a lot of paperwork. What are your suggestions?
Before we drop off into that, I remember my dad, my MAGA dad, sending me a link with what was it, Richard Davis Hansen, pseudo historian, and Eric Metaxas. And Eric Metaxas said that he liked Trump because of his Jacksonian policies. And yeah, Eric Metaxas was talking about Andy Jackson. And it, if you're not going to understand what Andy Jackson did as president with the Indian Removal Act of 1830, you're not going to remember that part of the history of our country. And then it's going to end up repeating again because, yeah. Anyway, mass deportation, anybody? Kind of like the Indian Removal Act, except they didn't bring armed military guards. Although, uh, anyway, Renee Good, Alex Preddy.
Well, I found that developing a process for each type of document was crucial to reversing the words and definitions from the Obama administration. Here's an overall strategy to implement. First, look for any OMB, that's the Office of Management and Budget, White House Office of Management and Budget, guidance. You'll want to instruct career employees that you, whatever level you are, you want to be informed of all OMB guidance and how it is being implemented internally. Oftentimes, careers will just get an OMB circular or an OMB advice, and then they just go along and they either ignore it or they don't put it in. You want to be involved in the process. You want to say, every single thing that comes in, I want to make sure that it is actually being implemented. This can easily be handled at the senior advisor or even special assistant level.
Oh boy, this is how you infiltrate.
The second thing you need to do, and
Hang on,
quickly,
let's go. What does that say? How to identify and replace misguided language. Look to OMB guidance. Instruct career employees that you want to be informed of all OMB guidance and how it is being implemented internally. Be aware of how career employees reporting to you are implementing the president's executive orders and OMB directives. Be involved in that process. Be a narc. Glad I went back and double checked that. Yeah, they're recruiting people to be narcs inside of Tattletales. How juvenile. How utterly appropriate for this man child they've chosen to be the face of their movement.
the second thing you need to do, and quickly, are look at guidance documents. Now, I've talked about this in other trainings. Guidance documents are simply a federal career employee's interpretation of a statute, of an appropriation given by Congress, of a rule or regulation, and how it's going to be implemented. A guidance document is not binding. It is simply, in some ways, just their opinion. The problem with a guidance document is that it has a tremendous amount of authority. Because if you are looking to an agency to find out what they're looking for your grant, or how your grant program will be implemented, or what rules they have around it, you're going to look at those guidance documents. They end up with a tremendous amount of authority. It really ends up being the career's agenda being forced onto the American people. A court is the only
Hang on a second. That sounded vaguely important.
They end up with a tremendous amount of authority. It really ends up being the career's agenda being forced onto the American people. A court is the only real institution that can give us a definitive interpretation of any kind of grant program, appropriation, or rule. So most likely the Office of Management and Budget will come out very quickly with a plan to take down all the guidance documents that are currently up that reflect the Biden administration's agenda. So you'll first want to look at that process.
Well, we saw a whole lot of that going on, didn't we? With removal of information from government websites. Let's see how to identify and replace misguiding language. Number two, look at all guidance documents. So audit the documents. That's a very Scientology idea. Guidance documents are simply a federal career employee's interpretation of a statute. So discount what the boss is saying. An appropriation given by Congress, a rule or regulation, and how it is going to be implemented. A guidance document is not binding. An interpretation given by Congress. Okay. OMB can and should come out with a plan to take down all guidance documents that reflect the Biden administration's agenda. Sort of a clean sweep sort of idea.
The second thing you're going to want to do, sort of the second layer, is to absolutely look at things that may not appear to be guidance documents, but are. For instance, one of the documents on our website was supposedly done by a Rutgers, professor, and so it looked like it wasn't actually career guidance. But when you really dug into the document, it was not part of any kind of grant program, and it really was just a career who asked a whole bunch of questions, and a Rutgers professor said yes. So it really, in the end, was a guidance document, and we brought it down. Another really
This is reminding me of what I learned looking at Operation Snow White, which was a project that was run by Scientology to try to clean up their records. They infiltrated quite a few federal agencies with some 5,000 Scientologists.
frightening example when I was running the Office on Violence Against Women was a provision in the Violence Against Women Act that about gender identity. And if you identified as a woman and you showed up at a woman's domestic violence shelter, you had to be accommodated. There were lawsuits, of course, about this as predators used that in order to gain entry into a place where there were vulnerable women.
No. As an advocate against domestic and sexual violence, I can tell you that doesn't happen. I mean, there are services set aside to provide a safe place for men, for women, and for transgender people. It's managed on a case by case situation. They're making it sound like there's this cookie cutter black and white process because of their binary thinking.
To me to be exactly opposite of
the intention.
Yeah, the intention of the Violence Against Women Act. In any event, it was directed toward just the Office on Violence Against Women programs. It was in the Violence Against Women Act, but in the Obama administration, the entire grant-making component of the Office of Justice programs, which I later went on to run, the head of that office actually wrote a guidance document that said that the provision in the Violence Against Women Act regarding to gender identity was intended to apply to every single DOJ grant program, that it wasn't limited to the Office on Violence Against Women. There was absolutely
I think she's just making that up.
no indication that this was true, but you can see that just by getting that particular legislation passed and the way that the careers then interpreted it created a complete change in culture across the Department of Justice. The next step will be to read.
So they keep referring to career employees as the career instead of being something a bit more specific. Um, that seems to, in my opinion, disconnect any sort of potential human connection with the individual, not seeing them as a fellow human, but as a career.
Every single executive order. I would suggest that, starting with an assistant, a special assistant, a senior advisor, that you get every single executive order and put it in a binder and have that binder for the principal and make sure that it's flagged for them. There will be a lot of executive orders that come out, and some of them actually, and know this, repeal other executive orders. So you need to then pull the executive orders that are being repealed so you are very clear about what needs to be redacted. Now let's go back to that OMB tip that I gave. And just like that, you need to be part of the process that the careers are using to implement executive orders. During the Trump administration, I can tell you that executive orders were signed, fully executed, where all the guidance was given. You gave an example of this, Bethany, to our office, and I later found out that it was just simply ignored. It's not worth, the price of the paper it's written on if your careers are not implementing what the president wanted.
So how to identify? Let's see, number three, read every single executive order. It seems like a lot of busy work going on here, which doesn't surprise me with the way I've seen uh, keyboard warriors sent out to do various and sundry focus work, be it go out and troll on Reddit or troll from 4chan. That is one of the platforms I meet on. Um, Going and trolling uh, liberal content creators. Anyway, so be a part of the process that career employees are using to implement executive orders. So insert yourself into the implementation process, or yeah, implementing your or inserting yourself into the implementation process ensures career employees are not inaccurately executing executive orders, thus diminishing the order's intended purpose and negating positive contributions to the president's agenda. Uh, a king's enforcer. Just crazy. Let's see what we got here. We got like 10 minutes left in the video.
I think you can expect that equity and all of the equity executive orders under Biden will be repealed early in the next administration. This is going to require a very detailed plan to execute the eradication of the dictates in the equity orders. For instance, there's a gender advisor position created by one of these executive orders. That position has to be eradicated, as well as all the task forces, the removal of all the equity plans from all the websites, and a complete rework of the language in internal and external policy documents and grant applications. Which leads me to grants and rules and regulations. Well, grant programs are funded with your federal tax dollars, and they are appropriated by Congress. So you are told how much money you have for what particular program. And typically your appropriations language will just give a very brief description of the program. And that's the direction that Congress has given the agency. Every single grant has conditions. You want to think of this like a carrot and a stick. You can have your federal money in order to support your program, but only if you agree to certain conditions, which are built into the grants. When I began at the Office on Violence Against Women, our grant applications were 75 to 110 pages long. Pages and pages of guidance that had no statutory or congressional counterpart, and tons of conditions. The conditions that you would need in order to receive the money. And you would need to continue to live with those conditions throughout the time of your grant.
That's how they work. That's exactly how they work. Grants, especially in a domestic violence shelter environment, you have to be able to provide a certain level of security for the residents, um, the clients. You need specially trained therapists. You need coordinators. You need front office. You need uh, oh good lord, you need phone bank people. and a lot of this is done on a volunteer basis, but the, oh, good grief. Oh man, this this is worse than I thought.
For instance, to receive grant money, certain programs would have to show a partnership with an LGBTQ support group. There was no
No, I mean that may have been written in there, but that's only an issue for these people because of their puritanical views that they've already been expressing all through this training video.
language in the appropriation for that grant that an LGBTQ subgrantee was mandated. The career said it was best practices and it was an Obama administration priority. This
Okay, so in 2015, 1 in 8 reported cases of domestic violence was a man. And it was roughly a 50-50 split between heterosexual men and gay men that were being beaten. So, uh, gay men probably aren't going to do well necessarily in a recovery environment that's designed for straight men. So, gay men might need a different environment, which that requires a whole different structure. It's still the same sort of structure as any other domestic violence shelter or recovery program, but it's specific, very specific. You don't help a man through domestic violence recovery exactly the same way you help a woman. Anyway, the processes are very similar, but they are not the same.
condition on many grants funded a lot of LGBTQ organizations. So we removed that language and we removed those conditions as we wrote the grants moving forward.
Identify and remove unnecessary conditions for pre-existing grants. Prepare the existing conditions that fund or otherwise support organizations that are not aligned with the president's policy priorities. So this is how a charitable organization that I used to have association with, Metropolitan Congregations United, their program was legislative action and a social justice environment for things like, oh, I don't know, getting clean drinking water into schools. Our state has a grant program. Money's already set aside. St. Louis schools could go up there and pick up the money and put in water filters in the schools that really need it here in town in the areas that are economically challenged to help get the lead out of the water. Uh, they also environmental justice, but they've already said that social justice is a derivative of Marxism through socialism, social democracy. This is so frustrating.
Rules and regulations also need ultimate political sign-off and a tremendous amount of political involvement. Your careers may draft the initial documents, the rules and regulations, but there should be multiple political edits on any final proposed rule or regulation. The left is excellent about holding up process. So you want to expect and prepare for thousands of comments coming from tons of left-supported groups on any rule that you put up. So expect that and have a plan to deal with those thousands, tens of thousands of comments in order to move the president's agenda. If you are prepared to deal with the comments that are coming in, then you aren't going to let them delay the rule because they have to be responded to, each one of the comments. The careers will want to
Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead.
follow the system that's currently in place for handling comments or conditions or how grants are written. You are empowered as a political appointee to adjust these processes as long as you are meeting all legal requirements. So you may have to deal with pushback, but really look at your process and change it.
Ensure all rules and regulations. Let's see. You are empowered as a political appointee to adjust this process as long as you are meeting all legal requirements. Example, how to review, address comments and questions regarding a rule. Canned responses is a script. They since they can't scan physical documents and watchdog individuals on how they implement these policies, they need humans because AI is not strong enough.
A tip here, in addition to the sheer volume of guidance and conditions to grants and explanations of proposed rules, is to ask careers to explain a grant program or the need for a rule in 2 sentences. It is astonishing how difficult it is for a career who works in the policy or grant space to actually accomplish this and find.
That's like somebody asking me how I broke away from purity culture. I can't answer that question in 2 sentences. I mean, I have a nutshell answer that borders on crude, but I can't effectively answer that question in 2 sentences.
Finally, use your common sense. Even if you see something that isn't directly addressed by an executive order or an OMB circular or directed by your agency head, you want to use your common sense to redact the words and definitions which are weakening our nation. As we have discussed, certain words and phrases used together have hidden definitions. A really good example is social emotional learning. That's actually the new buzzword for CRT, or critical race theory. Here's a tip. When you see phrases, any phrase like this, one that sounds innocuous, ask your careers to identify the origin of that phrase. Where did it come from? Why are you?
And this is why sometimes it triggers me when people lean into etymology, the study of the origins of words and phrases. They take such a Scientology approach to all of this, which doesn't surprise me because of how deeply entwined the two movements are.
You using that phrase particularly? What does it mean based on the original intent of those words? And then,
Or, in other words, they defined that as authorial intent. What was the authorial intent? What did the author actually mean? And when somebody challenges you with well, you misunderstood because you don't know the authorial intent, that means you don't know what's going on in my head, so you're dumb. You can't read my brain, so you don't know what's going on. Shut up. It's so demeaning.
I would highly recommend you start your own research. As a last note,
Oh, of course, do your own research. Trust the plan, right? Q.
plan to read a lot of documents. Know how your careers are implementing the president's executive orders, OMB directives, and be very involved in that process. I can't stress enough the need to control all documents. Create a system where nothing goes out, nothing is published, nothing is put on your website without review by a delegated political or the principal of any office.
That let me back that up about 20 seconds. Let's listen to that again.
OMB directives, and be very involved in that process. I can't stress enough the need to control all documents. Create a system where nothing goes out, nothing is published, nothing is put on your website without review by a delegated political or the principal of any office.
One more time for good measure.
OMB directives, and be very involved in that process. I can't stress enough the need to control all documents. Create a system where nothing goes out, nothing is published, nothing is put on your website without review by a delegated political or the principal of any office. Ask lots of questions and do not make assumptions. And finally, If a career employee rushes in and says it is an emergency, and I think a lot of people who are an assistant, chief of staff, maybe senior advisor or special assistants are going to have careers just descending on them, talking about how it's an emergency that the principal sign something. That's a red flag. Right away, it's a red flag. By the time you get into your position, you will realize that the government moves very, very slowly. Just think about your clearance process and how long that took. These documents need to be read even more carefully. If a career thinks they can push you to sign something by giving it to you at the very last minute, that will become the norm, and it will hinder your ability to actually go through a process, read things, edit things, and make sure that they are completely in line with the president's priorities and agenda.
But it's perfectly okay to drop a 1,000-page document on Congress the night before it gets voted on. I've seen both sides do that.
President's agenda will be in peril from your office if you allow this emergency kind of process.
Katie,
Digging your heels and hold tight for your party loyalty. Stick to what the king says. That's what she's saying. It's exactly what she's saying. And it does not necessarily have to be Trump. This plan was written for a conservative president.
that was great. Thank you for taking us through that process. Do you see? The monster is in the attic, and it is layered in virtually every document in the federal government. Grant applications, rules, regulations, internal and external policy documents, guidance documents, tweets, speeches, and panels. Every one of these phrases or words that are not corrected by being redacted or rephrased is a failure of the presidency. As the Heritage Foundation's president, Dr. Kevin Roberts, boldly and courageously states in the Mandate for Leadership, the next conservative president must make the institutions of American civil society hard targets for woke culture warriors. This starts with deleting the terms sexual orientation and gender identity, SOGI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, gender, gender equality, gender equity, gender awareness, gender sensitive, abortion, reproductive health, reproductive rights, and any other term used to deprive Americans of their First Amendment rights out of every federal rule, agency regulation, contract, grant, regulations, and piece of legislation that exists. And the next conservative president will only be able to do so with your help. Are you up for this challenge? We think you are. Together, let's conquer the monsters in Uncle Sam's attic.
Well, that was quite interesting to watch. And how much of it did we see Doge implement? So that was straight out of Project 2025, which I had seen that parallel before. I just hadn't looked at it through this particular lens. So yeah, that was interesting. And there's only 23 more episodes to watch. So there's that. Well, if you've hung in this long, an hour and a half almost, you tell me that you're definitely a hungry person. You really want to know what's going on. Do me a favor, at least drop a blue heart in the comments. Give me a thumbs up if you liked it. Share this video with somebody that you think could really use it. That's my intention behind this work. And if you haven't subscribed, think about doing that for me too, please. Until the next video, I hope that you take care of yourself so that you can help take care of each other and get the rest you need. Keep track of those fluids. I got to get some more for myself.
Everybody